Hey guys, tonight we're tiptoeing into the deliriously weird, unexpectedly hazardous, and thoroughly giggle-worthy world of 1800s London high society and their favorite recreational chemical, nitrous oxide, also known as laughing gas. Picture it. You, lounging in a velvet-draped salon, surrounded by the Victorian elite, all snorting gas from a silk balloon and cackling so hard someone's monocle flies off. Because before there were wellness retreats, oat milk lattes, or those overpriced float tanks, the real flex among the upper crust was nearly giggling yourself to death at a gas party. And if you think your last office Christmas party was wild, you've clearly never seen a duchess try to recite Shakespeare while involuntarily meowing. But before we take this gas-powered time machine for a spin, do me a favor, only if you genuinely enjoy these bedtime oddities. Like the video, subscribe for more absurd history, and comment below with where you're listening from, and whether you've ever made a questionable decision at a party. Just don't incriminate yourself. Now, dim those lights, turn on a fan for that cozy white noise, maybe nestle down in your most forgiving pajamas, and let's get comfortable. Or at least as comfortable as one can get before being surrounded by a dozen aristocrats wheezing like malfunctioning bagpipes. Let's pause a moment. Have you ever wondered what really went on at those respectable Victorian parties? Were corsets as uncomfortable as they look? Or did the nitrous just help everyone forget they couldn't breathe? Did anyone ever accidentally propose marriage mid-giggle fit? Who was in charge of refilling the balloons? And did anyone check if the butler was pocketing the leftovers? Could you outlast a viscount in a laughing contest? Did people have to sign waivers? Or was this just another Tuesday in London's wildest drawing rooms? And most importantly, why does every era's elite find new ways to almost die in the pursuit of being on trend? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1802 London. Your shoes have buttons, your hair requires engineering, and you're about to inhale a lungful of scientific optimism mixed with pure chaos. Good luck. You're minding your own business, probably worrying about your sideburn symmetry when a sealed envelope arrives, summoning you to an evening of scientific amusement. Translation: someone's about to invent the group text, Victorian, style, and you're not sure if you should bring a snack or a will. Let's set the scene. It's a damp Thursday afternoon in London, and the coal smoke is drifting through the air with the optimism of a city that hasn't yet invented the germ theory of disease. You're fiddling with your cravat in the mirror, trying to decide if it's rakishly askew or just a cry for help, when your butler appears. He's holding out a heavy envelope that smells faintly of lavender, and the kind of perfume that can only be described as financially reckless. The wax seal features a family crest so over the top it probably involves a griffin wrestling, a Latin motto about moderation. You break the seal and unfold a sheet of creamy vellum, embossed with enough gold leaf to pay a small footman's annual wage. It's from Lady Wickham, or Sir Percival, or some other member of the scientific elite, whose hobbies include cataloguing beetles and inventing new ways to nearly expire in their own home. The language is florid. You are cordially invited, it says, to witness demonstrations of the most exhilarating and modern discoveries in pneumatic chemistry. No details, no start time, just the promise of unforgettable merriment, daring discourse, and refreshments of the highest order, which could mean caviar, or based on last time, lukewarm aspic shaped like Queen Victoria's head. You pause, mid-read, and run a quick inventory. Is this the sort of party where you need to bring flowers? Or just a willingness to sign a medical waiver? Should you write a polite reply declining due to prior engagement with a reputable physician, or just resign yourself to another night of unregulated science and questionable appetizers? The last time you attended an amusing experiment in a drawing room, Someone nearly burned off their eyebrows, and the cat spent a week hiding in the coal cellar. Of course, you're not alone. The entire city is abuzz with these new, vaguely dangerous invitations. There's an undeniable thrill in being one of the chosen few to witness science in action, which, in 1802, translates to maybe try not to faint this time. Your friends are all receiving similar summons. One boasts about being invited to 3 gas parties in a single week, as if this is a sign of status rather than a blatant disregard for respiratory health. The social pressure is real. To decline is to risk appearing hopelessly out of touch, or worse, dull. So, you begin to strategize. There's the obligatory reply, written in your finest copperplate, expressing delighted anticipation at the prospect of furthering the bounds of natural philosophy. You wax poetic about the thrill of scientific adventure, while quietly reminding yourself to avoid the punch this time. You wonder if you should bring a guest, preferably one who can identify symptoms of hypoxia at 20 paces. As the day of the party draws nearer, rumors swirl. Who else will be there? Will the Prince Regent make an appearance? Or just his third best cousin who's obsessed with collecting rare fungi? You hear whispers about the main event, a demonstration of the mysterious laughing gas by none other than Sir Humphrey Davy himself, who's already legendary for inhaling alarming quantities of various gases and living to lecture about it. There's talk of poetry readings, musical interludes, and at least one person vowing to recite Hamlet entirely under the influence. The anticipation builds. The house staff is on high, alert, polishing shoes, pressing waistcoats, and muttering darkly about the time the mistress tried to serve canapes made entirely out of gelatin. You rehearse polite small talk, brush up on your knowledge of chemistry. It's pronounced knit rose, not night rose, you imbecile. And, just in case, practice a few good excuses to slip out early if someone passes out on the chaise. And when the evening finally arrives, you find yourself stepping into a carriage, invitation in hand, feeling that familiar blend of excitement and dread reserved for events where amusement is synonymous with mild peril. The gas lamps flicker as you pull away, and for a brief moment, you wonder if history will remember this night, or if you'll just end up as another cautionary tale whispered about at next week's gathering. Congratulations. You're officially on the guest list for history's most ridiculous RSVP. Welcome to the world of deadly nitrous oxide parties, where the only thing more dangerous than the experiments are the egos. What does one wear to a party where the main event is voluntary asphyxiation? If you guessed breathable fabrics, you're out of luck. You layer yourself into 17 pounds of silk, half your family's jewelry, and a cravat tied tight enough to guarantee pre-party dizziness. Let's be honest. Getting ready for an 1800s nitrous oxide party isn't so much about comfort as it is about social survival. You start with your base layers, which is a polite way of saying enough linen to upholster a fainting couch. Over that, you wriggle into silk stockings, dyed a shade of lavender that says, "I have money," but questionable taste. Next come breeches so tight you're forced to walk like you're perpetually late for a duel. If you're a woman, the layers double. Chemise, corset, petticoats, gown, and some decorative thing called a fichu, which exists solely to make you sweat through your perfume before you even reach the front door. As you dress, there's an ongoing calculation. Is it better to look dazzling and risk spontaneous combustion, or go for practicality and be mistaken for a housemaid? The answer, as always, is risk it all for fashion. The standard for formal attire in this era is, could you survive a snowstorm in July, and do you appear rich enough to buy a parliament seat if you get bored? The cravat alone is a weapon of mass suffocation, starched, tied, and strategically knotted to say, I'm ready for a medical emergency, but only if it's stylish. Then there's the jewelry, brooches, rings, necklaces, and enough paste diamonds to blind a small horse. You fasten cufflinks, shaped like classical ruins, pin a cameo of a distant relative, possibly alive, possibly not, to your bodice, and debate whether your tiara is too much. It's not. If anything, it's barely enough. This is a society where understated means fewer than 3 hat plumes, and minimalist means not setting off the burglar alarm as you walk by the silverware. And don't forget your hair. For men, that means a careful application of pomade, preferably the kind that smells of pine tar and colonial ambition, while arranging curls to appear both effortless and mathematically precise. For women, it's an updo so elaborate that birds could nest in it and possibly already have. Hairpins, ribbons, and maybe a discreet powdering of arsenic-laced flour. For shine, darling. Complete the look. You're not sure if you're ready for a party or about to be auctioned at Sotheby's. As the minutes tick by, you feel your own pulse pounding somewhere beneath the brocade. You're running late, but that's half the point. Fashionably late isn't just a phrase, it's a competitive sport. To arrive early is to risk being forced into small talk with the host's third cousin, whose conversational topics are limited to crop rotation and gout. Arrive too late, and you'll miss the first round of laughing gas and the chance to snicker at Lord Upton's regrettable sideburns. Your carriage finally arrives, drawn by horses who look at your outfit with the kind of pity reserved for overstuffed suitcases. As you step outside, you do a last-minute check. Gloves perfectly matched, shoes polished to a mirror shine, pocket watch wound and set to aristocratic indifference. The air is thick with fog and coal smoke, and as you climb into the cab, you briefly mourn the invention of personal hygiene. During the jostling ride across London's cobbled streets, you rehearse excuses for potential wardrobe failures. It's a French cut will explain any ripped seams. All the rage in Paris covers stains, and avant-garde is your get-out-of-jail-free card for fashion experiments gone horribly wrong. And as you descend at the grand townhouse, chandelier light spilling onto the steps, laughter already echoing from inside, you realize that every party guest is locked in the same battle. Not against science, not even against the dangers of nitrous oxide, but against the tyranny of their own wardrobe. Tonight, you'll risk public humiliation, mild strangulation, and perhaps your life, all for the chance to look good while losing consciousness in polite company. Welcome to the apex of Regency fashion, where beauty is pain and disaster is always in style. You rattle up to the house in a carriage, where footmen with better posture than sense help you inside. The air is thick with perfume, pomade, and the kind of anticipation that only comes before a completely preventable medical emergency. The horses, probably the only sane creatures involved in tonight's affair, toss their heads and snort as if to say, "Good luck, you poor, overdressed soul." You step out, balancing a hat that could double as a serving tray, and trying to remember if your invitation specified evening gloves or just something you won't mind losing in a parlor game. One footman opens the carriage door, another offers an arm, and a third, possibly there, just for moral support, gives you a look that says, "We've seen things." As you ascend the steps, every cobblestone and marble slab threatens to undo both your dignity and your shoe buckles. At the door, you're met by the butler, a man whose eyebrows have witnessed the decline and fall of at least 3 family fortunes. He accepts your calling card with a bow so deep you worry he'll never get back up. The door swings open, and you're enveloped in a wall of warmth, candlelight, and the overwhelming scent of at least 7 competing colognes. You take a moment to marvel at how the air inside already feels thinner. The effect of 100 guests sharing the same square footage and approximately half the oxygen content. The entrance hall is a spectacle. You're greeted by a sea of velvet and satin, gentlemen comparing watch chains and ladies fluttering fans with the nervous energy of people who know someone is going to faint. They're just hoping it's not them. From somewhere in the distance, a string quartet is valiantly playing what might be Mozart, or, equally likely, an adagio written for the express purpose of soothing social anxiety. You hand off your outer coat to a servant who vanishes with the speed and efficiency of a magician, and suddenly you're on display. There's a delicate, unspoken competition for who can make the most memorable entrance. Some guests pause dramatically in the doorway, giving everyone time to assess their outfit and speculate about their income. Others slip in with all the grace of a startled deer, hoping to blend into the wallpaper. You stride in with an air of practiced indifference, clutching your invitation like a talisman and desperately scanning for someone you know, or at least someone who looks more terrified than you. It's a sensory overload. The gaslight flickers off gilded mirrors, painting everyone in a flattering but faintly unnatural glow. The parquet floor is waxed to a perilous sheen. Each step is an exercise in controlled panic. If you listen closely, you can hear the low buzz of gossip already circulating. Who arrived with whom? Whose sideburns are trending dangerously Victorian? And whether the host will finally unveil that new electrostatic apparatus he's been bragging about since last spring. You're swept along with the flow of bodies, handed a glass of something chilled and allegedly non-lethal, and ushered into the main drawing room. Here, the anticipation is thick enough to slice. Guests murmur about the demonstration, dropping hints as if they're discussing state secrets rather than recreational asphyxiation. Some look excited, others slightly green, and one elderly gentleman is already practicing deep, slow breaths, perhaps as a preemptive defense against either the gas or Lady Fenwick's perfume. Everywhere you look, there's the choreography of high society on full display. Awkward bows, elaborate curtsies, and the inevitable moment when two ladies attempt to pass each other and end up in a tangle of skirts and apologies. In the corner, a young poet is nervously composing verses on a napkin, certain that tonight will either be his big break or his last conscious memory. By the time the host sweeps in to greet you, beaming, with a wild look in his eye that can only mean I've been huffing my own supply, you realize you've made it. You've arrived at the front lines of fashionable science, ready to bear witness to history, hilarity, or possibly just a room full of overdressed people laughing until they faint. Welcome to the party. Take a deep breath while you still can. The salon is a gaudy fever dream. Velvet drapes, flickering gaslight, a portrait of some ancestor who definitely wouldn't approve. Guests mingle nervously, eyeing a mysterious brass canister in the corner. Welcome to history's first pop-up vape lounge. You pause in the threshold, momentarily blinded by the sheer density of fringe and tassels. Everywhere you look, something seems to shimmer. The chandelier's crystals throw specks of rainbow light onto brocade wallpaper, and there are so many mirrors that, for a brief and alarming moment, you suspect you've walked into a funhouse run by someone with a monocle addiction. The air is perfumed with lavender, rosewater, and a hint of something acrid and metallic, possibly eau de science experiment. On the far wall, the aforementioned ancestor glares down from his gilt frame with the expression of a man who once wrote a 3-volume treatise against the dangers of excess merriment. His powdered wig seems to bristle in disapproval as the current generation does its level best to invent group giggling-induced unconsciousness. You make a mental note to avoid the spot where his painted eyes seem to follow you, in case the judgment is contagious. The guests themselves are a feverish cross-section of London's finest and strangest. There's Lady Beauchamp, with a hat so large it has its own gravitational pull, discussing the finer points of ostrich feather quality with the wife of a minor baronet. In the corner, two poets argue about whether the soul can truly be liberated by laughing gas, or if, as one insists, it merely produces windy imbecility. You spot Sir Peregrine fussing over his moustache and a cluster of young debutantes doing their best to look both curious and above it all, as if they weren't secretly hoping for a story to dine out on for years. At the center of it all sits the real star of the evening, the brass canister. It glints ominously in the gaslight, attached by a tangle of rubber tubing to a collection of silk balloons and what looks suspiciously like the business end of a teapot. The canister's presence inspires a mix of awe, curiosity, and the sort of apprehension usually reserved for wild animals and new medical treatments. Every so often, a guest edges closer, pretending to examine a nearby fern, only to scuttle away when the host's scientific assistant makes a sudden movement. You try to blend in, balancing a cup of something allegedly non-alcoholic while sidestepping a footman on a mission to refill the punch. Small talk swirls around you. Who brought the best lemon cakes? Whether it's true Lady Harrington keeps a weasel in her muff? And, most importantly, who's brave enough to be the first to try the gas? Everyone pretends to be more interested in the string quartet, but their eyes keep darting to the mechanical marvel in the corner. The decor only adds to the tension. Heavy velvet curtains swallow all sound, but the clink of glass and the occasional shriek from someone who's just discovered the fainting couch is, in fact, occupied. Tapestries depicting mythological scenes take on a new absurdity when you realize that even the gods in these embroideries are probably staring in disbelief at what's about to happen. On the mantel, a collection of porcelain figurines leans at precarious angles, an unspoken reminder that, in this house, both objects and reputations can shatter with very little warning. As the crowd swells, so does the volume. Laughter starts as a nervous titter and builds in the corners, fanning out as people loosen up. There's an air of conspiratorial excitement. After all, this is science, but it's also entertainment, a chance to break free from the usual recitations and card games and flirt with the boundaries of propriety. And, if we're honest, respiratory safety. And just as you start to feel at ease, a hush sweeps through the room. Sir Humphrey Davy, resplendent in an evening coat that would make a peacock blush, takes his place by the canister and begins to explain the wonders of nitrous oxide, his words competing with the collective heartbeat of a salon on the brink of absurdity. It's time. The scene is set. The guests are ready. The gas is primed. And history is about to get a lot more ridiculous. All you have to do is survive the evening without ending up as a cautionary tale, or worse, the inspiration for a new family portrait. At the heart of this circus is Sir Humphrey Davy, part chemist, part showman, all questionable decision-making. He's clutching a silver goblet, regaling everyone with tales of the time he inhaled so much nitrous he forgot his own name. Sir Humphrey is the sort of man who can make dangerously over-caffeinated look like a lifestyle choice. He floats from guest to guest, his eyes sparkling with a mixture of genuine scientific curiosity and the unmistakable glint of a child who's just discovered that the cookie jar is unlocked and absolutely bottomless. His hair is tousled in that way that's fashionable for geniuses. 1 part creative frenzy, 2 parts lack of sleep, 3 parts I had a minor laboratory explosion before lunch. He holds court with a confidence reserved for men who've voluntarily inhaled more experimental substances than they've eaten hot dinners. At any moment, he's prepared to launch into stories about the first time I nearly asphyxiated for the advancement of knowledge, or the famous episode when he induced giggling fits in the entire royal institution and still managed to publish his findings without anyone suggesting an intervention. No topic is too technical or too trivial. One moment, it's the chemical nature of oxides, and the next, It's whether your spleen feels particularly giggly this evening. The crowd hangs on his every word, partly out of admiration, partly to see if he'll finally let slip the secret to his famously resilient lungs. Every host has their party tricks. Davy's just involve a little more risk and a lot more public liability. He's the inventor, after all, not only of many new laboratory techniques, but of the Victorian party as full-contact sport. The line between scientific experiment and social spectacle is perilously thin, and if anyone's going to set the drawing room on fire, it'll be Davy, with a well-meaning demonstration that goes just a bit sideways. Tonight, Sir Humphrey's in rare form. He's greeting guests with the kind of gusto usually reserved for men who've recently won a bet, and who know the results will be hilarious. You watch as he moves between groups, silver goblets sloshing, never quite spilling a drop, always ready with a perfectly timed anecdote about the medicinal virtues of laughing gas, or, failing that, a warning about unexpected effects, delivered with a smile that says, "I survived, mostly." You notice how the younger guests, especially the budding poets and amateur scientists, cluster around him. They're hoping to soak up a little genius by osmosis, or at least score an invitation to the after-party in the laboratory, where the real mischief happens. Davy is equally at ease with the nervous matrons, reassuring them that, no, the gas is not known to cause spontaneous waltzing. Though there was that one time in Bath, it's all part of the show. His laughter booms through the popped salon, breaking the tension, making the whole affair feel less like a brush with chemical peril and more like a rollicking lark. He waves his goblet, offers toasts to science, to laughter, and to the possibility of remembering your own name tomorrow morning. The guests cheer, some with genuine enthusiasm, others with the quiet resignation of people who realize they are now participants in something that might one day require a footnote in a history book or a medical text. You, meanwhile, are caught somewhere between admiration and concern. Davy's genius is undeniable, his charm is real, his enthusiasm infectious. But beneath it all is that little hint of chaos, the sense that if the party takes a turn, it won't be because someone spilled the punch, but because the host invented a new element and decided to test it out on the wallpaper. So, you hover on the edge of his circle, listening in as he promises that tonight's experiments will be perfectly safe, probably legal, and almost certainly unforgettable. After all, it's not every day you attend a soirée hosted by the only man in London who can transform a drawing room into a laboratory and make everyone in it hope, for just a moment, to forget themselves entirely. There's a hush. The first brave soul approaches the apparatus, inhales deeply, and erupts in uncontrollable giggles. Within minutes, everyone's lining up for a turn like it's the world's most exclusive karaoke machine. For a brief moment, time stops. Everyone watches as Miss Amelia Fortescue, renowned for her steely reserve and a jawline capable of cutting cheddar, steps forward. With trembling hands, she grasps the velvet-wrapped hose, glancing back at the crowd as if someone might suddenly invoke common sense and call the whole thing off. No such luck. Sir Humphrey Davy stands beside her, all twinkle and encouragement, as if he's about to present her with a Nobel Prize and not a possible case of lightheadedness. Amelia hesitates, then inhales with the sort of commitment usually reserved for wedding vows or ice baths. The effect is immediate. Her composure dissolves, her shoulders shake, and an unladylike snort erupts. She covers her mouth, eyes wide with shock, but the laughter won't be stopped. It rolls out of her, half giggle, half howl, and the room, frozen in suspense, bursts into applause. The spell is broken. Suddenly, everyone wants a turn. The hesitant now look bold. The bold look desperate, and those with respiratory issues pretend they never even heard the phrase pre-existing condition. The host's assistant works the canister. Balloons are filled, and you watch as people you've only ever seen discussing tax policy or the correct use of salad forks now transform into cackling sprites, legs giving way as the laughter overtakes them. The party's social hierarchy is momentarily erased. Tonight, everyone is united in the pursuit of completely losing their dignity in public. You do your best to act nonchalant as the queue grows. The Viscount, who once criticized your dancing, is clutching a balloon like a life preserver. Lady Pembroke, always one for caution, takes her turn and then promptly drops onto a settee, tears streaming down her cheeks, whispering about seeing colors in the curtains. Even the butler, usually immune to nonsense, cracks a reluctant smile as he refills the glasses of those too weak from giggling to hold a teacup. Peer pressure takes on a new and dangerous form. Not joining in means risking being labelled a killjoy. Or worse, the subject of the next round of gossip. You try to recall any legitimate excuse, doctor's orders, sudden religious conviction, an urgent appointment with a well-ventilated room, but it's no use. The crowd has decided. Tonight, you laugh or you lose your social standing. The line snakes across the parlor, a parade of lace, brocade, and repressed hysteria. Someone begins timing their inhalations, insisting the longer the better. Someone else claims to have seen the future, which, given the state of their hair, is likely true. The effects vary wildly. Some guests erupt into shrieking peals, their laughter bouncing off the chandeliers and alarming the parlor cat. Others simply crumple, clutching their sides, too weak to do anything but gasp for air between spasms. A few stoic souls claim to feel nothing and are immediately subjected to a second proper attempt by Sir Humphrey himself, who refuses to accept defeat, at least not until he's turned every last guest into a giggling puddle. And then, inevitably, things start to go sideways. Lord Wexley, an enthusiastic participant, manages to inhale so enthusiastically that he stumbles backward into a tea trolley, sending porcelain skidding across the floor. A group of young poets begin laughing so loudly that the string quartet threatens to revolt. The parlor's decor, carefully arranged, painstakingly coordinated, now looks like the aftermath of a particularly joyful cyclone. You finally find yourself at the front of the queue, balloon in hand. The room quiets, expectant, and you realize there's no turning back. You take a deep breath, part anticipation, part peer pressure, all self-preservation. The gas is cool, slightly sweet, and within seconds, you feel the familiar rush, nerves turning to exhilaration, and then, suddenly, laughter bubbling up from nowhere. For a moment, you're weightless, timeless, and gloriously, absurdly free. Welcome to the first puff. The science is questionable, the hygiene suspect, but the hysteria? Absolutely contagious. This is Victorian high society at its most unguarded, its most ridiculous, and, for a brief, breathless moment, its most fun. What follows is pure chaos. Lords and ladies doubled over, shrieking with laughter, some collapsing onto fainting couches, others developing sudden passionate opinions about table legs. For a few enchanted minutes, the most powerful people in London become human jello. The drawing room dissolves into a scene so ridiculous that, if a time traveller from the 21st century wandered in, they'd assume they'd crashed the world's first group improv class. The Marquis of Pemberton, usually so stiff he squeaks, has fallen to his knees and is now delivering a monologue to a grandfather clock, tearfully declaring it the only reliable man in the room. The Duchess of Wexley, meanwhile, has gotten the giggles so badly that she's turned an alarming shade of plum, her elaborate coiffure listing to starboard with every guffaw. You've never seen anything like it. The genteel airs and stony faces that rule the daylight hours have melted away, replaced by snorts, cackles, and outright shrieks that bounce off the frescoed ceiling. Someone, perhaps Lord Fitzwilliam, attempts a somersault and winds up in a tangle of crinolines and carpet. The effect is contagious. It's as if the entire room has been enchanted by some anarchic spirit, or possibly just a large quantity of poorly understood chemicals. Beneath the shrill chorus, the musicians, hired, one suspects, for their discretion, gamely soldier on, their sonata now competing with the sound of 30 aristocrats howling like medieval banshees. The violinist's left eyebrow climbs ever higher as Lady Caraway rolls off her chaise and starts reciting Latin poetry to a potted aspidistra. One young debutante is convinced she's become a pigeon, flapping her arms and cooing with unbridled glee. Two gentlemen have invented a sport that seems to involve hopping over ottomans while quoting lines from Ovid. You try to stay out of their path. Last week's party resulted in a sprained ankle and a strongly worded letter to the editor of the Times. Meanwhile, the furniture becomes both a hazard and a source of inspiration. An antique settee becomes the centerpiece for a spirited debate on whether or not it's haunted. A marble-topped side table receives 3 declarations of undying love and is later found wearing Lady Fenwick's shawl. Even the portrait of Great Uncle Archibald on the wall, stoic as ever, looks as if he might crack a smile if only out of self-preservation. You notice how easily the rigid boundaries of class and decorum crumble in the haze of shared hilarity. No one cares about titles, inheritance, or etiquette. Not when the Dowager Countess is composing limericks about her bunions. The fear of embarrassment, that ever-present ghost at every London gathering, is banished. In its place is a sort of gleeful anarchy, a permission slip to be as ridiculous as you dare. If you've ever longed to see a duke attempt to tap dance or a respected scholar try to rhyme orange and porridge, this is your night. Peer pressure mutates into communal delirium. A new round of balloons is passed out, and everyone cheers as the youngest guest, barely out of the nursery, attempts to blow up a balloon twice her size. The results are predictably disastrous but endlessly amusing. Someone opens a window to let out the bad airs, only to be distracted by the beauty of the moon and start composing a love letter to it. It is, in every way, a spectacle. From the outside, the party might seem like the end of civilization, or its accidental reinvention, but inside, it feels like freedom. From judgment, from boredom, from the crushing weight of being taken seriously. For one glorious evening, the problems of the world are put on hold and replaced by the desperate, unself-conscious pursuit of laughter. Eventually, as the initial frenzy fades and everyone is left in a state of rumpled, breathless satisfaction, you realize you've just witnessed something rare, the moment when society lets its guard down, drops its script, and remembers how to be absolutely, wonderfully silly. This is the real magic of the night, the symphony of silliness in full swing, echoing through every chandelier and velvet curtain. As the giggles escalate, so do the wardrobe malfunctions. Someone's wig goes flying. Someone else's monocle ricochets into a punch bowl. It's a miracle no one's corset explodes. Welcome to the unspoken hazard of a Victorian gas party. The dangerous intersection of uncontrollable laughter and high stakes, accessorizing. What no etiquette manual could have prepared you for is the physical toll that a bout of hysteria will take on a room full of people trussed up tighter than Christmas geese. It turns out that when you lace half the population into steel-boned corsets and balance the other half's dignity on a single glass lens, you're practically begging for disaster the moment merriment breaks out. It begins innocently enough. A lady's feathered hat slips askew as she clutches her sides, her peals of laughter shaking the very foundations of her carefully constructed updo. You spot a pair of pearl earrings rolling under the settee, liberated by their owner's enthusiastic head thrown back chortle. The real carnage, though, starts with the monocles. Lord Street John, proudly sporting a monocle the size of a carriage wheel, lets out such a snort that the glass pops from his eye and ricochets spectacularly across the room. It lands in Lady Beecham's punch bowl, where it's mistaken for an unusually clear ice cube and nearly swallowed by a nervous poet. The room erupts into a new round of chaos as guests realize their accessories are, in fact, not rated for high-velocity mirth. Hairpins ping across the parlor like miniature grape shot. Waistbands creak ominously. A particularly enthusiastic debutante, red-faced and breathless, bursts the seam of her velvet glove and spends the rest of the evening surreptitiously hiding her exposed thumb in the folds of her sash. Meanwhile, wigs, already a precarious proposition, start slipping. You watch, horrified yet fascinated, as a powdered marvel the size of a small badger slowly edges sideways during a fit of cackling and finally topples to the carpet. Its owner, blissfully unaware, continues a heated debate with a sofa cushion, now several ounces lighter and infinitely more aerodynamic. For every guest valiantly maintaining composure, there are 3 more teetering on the brink of total sartorial collapse. The butler, that unflappable pillar of the household, is caught mid-sprint, chasing a runaway hairpiece with the seriousness of a man tasked with retrieving crown jewels. You catch the frantic whispers of ladies negotiating a ceasefire between fashion tape and gravity, determined not to let a stray stocking ruin their social standing. But nowhere is the tension more literal than in the corset department. The laughter comes in waves, and with each convulsive gasp, the silk and whalebone are put to the ultimate test. One young woman, a veteran of 5 seasons, wisely excuses herself to the hallway after nearly losing consciousness mid-giggle. Another is not so lucky. A sudden volcanic outburst from her friend causes a seam to split with an audible pop, and the room holds its breath, part sympathy, part admiration for a truly heroic feat of tailoring. Men fare little better. Cravats, those stiffly starched badges of masculinity, are wrenched loose, their knots wilting in the humidity of mass hilarity. Pocket watches fly from waistcoats as gentlemen double over, inadvertently timing how long it takes to completely unravel one's dignity. Even the formidable Sir Humphrey Davy is forced to surrender his perfectly shined shoes after an especially wild kick sends one sailing under the pianoforte, never to be seen again until next Tuesday's cleaning. By the end of the night, the party looks like a cross between a fashion house after a tornado and the aftermath of a particularly eventful game of charades. Hair has been let down, jewels are strewn about, and the monocle population has been decimated. Yet there's a kind of triumph in it. The disasters become badges of honor. Evidence that, for a night, style and status gave way to something far more memorable. The rare, raucous joy of laughing yourself apart, one accessory at a time. When conversation runs dry, out comes the laughing gas relay, a game involving balloons, frantic running, and an alarming disregard for personal safety. It's all fun and games until the Viscount faints onto a potted fern. You've just watched a monocle sail across the room, and before you can retrieve your dignity, someone shouts, "Let's have a race!" These are dangerous words at any gathering. But when the crowd is comprised of tightly corseted socialites and gentlemen running on equal parts nitrous and bravado, you know you're about to witness either history or the world's first group insurance claim. The rules are gloriously simple and astonishingly reckless. Each team lines up at one end of the drawing room, and at the starting bell, a servant's discreet cough, usually, one person sprints forward, grabs a gas balloon, inhales as deeply as they dare, and runs back, giggling uncontrollably. The balloon is then passed to the next teammate, who repeats the process. Somewhere in the mayhem, scorekeeping dissolves into confusion, and the real winner is the person who manages to keep their wig, shoes, and consciousness all at once. You join in because it's that or be labelled a killjoy, and besides, there's something hypnotic about the sight of Lady Fenwick, usually the soul of decorum, running flat out while howling like a barn owl with hiccups. The floor, waxed to a sheen that would shame a skating rink, is now a treacherous obstacle. Stockings slip, shoes skid, and several spectators take bets on who will be the first to tumble. Lord Pembroke, convinced that speed is key, launches himself down the parquet, balloon in hand, only to miss the turn and crash directly into a table laden with lemon syllabub. The table survives. His dignity does not. As the relay picks up pace, the boundaries of good sense and furniture placement are gleefully ignored. Balloons burst mid-stride, sending squeals of laughter and clouds of gas wafting through the room. A particularly enthusiastic participant, young Miss Abernathy, tries to combine inhaling and running simultaneously, which ends with her face down in an antique rug, and the butler quietly re-evaluating his life choices. The houseplants, innocent bystanders in this chemical circus, are battered by falling aristocrats. The potted fern, to its credit, cushions the Viscount's collapse like it's done this before. The mayhem is infectious. What started as a simple game quickly becomes a test of agility, lung capacity, and raw survival instinct. Team strategies emerge. Some focus on steady breathing, others on speed, and one faction seems to be attempting interpretive dance, though this may be the side effect of prolonged exposure to nitrous oxide. Cheering rings out. The host's dog, sensing chaos, adds its own voice to the uproar, darting between legs and snatching an abandoned glove as a trophy. You, somewhere in the queue, clutch your balloon with a mix of fear and giddy excitement. It's your turn. You sprint forward, grab the next puff, and for a dizzying instant, the world narrows to a swirl of laughter, breathlessness, and desperate hope that you won't be the one to bring down the parlor curtains. There is no dignity left, only the mad joy of running, tripping, and gasping with 50 of your newest, least coordinated friends. By the time the relay is mercifully called to a halt, the drawing room looks like a battlefield. Balloons, deflated, popped, and crumpled, litter the carpet. Shoes, shawls, and the occasional tiara are scattered in the wreckage. The guests themselves are draped across furniture, gasping for breath and clutching at each other, with that mixture of embarrassment and exhilaration that only comes after surviving something utterly ridiculous. The laughter fades to a contented hum, and someone proposes a toast to the fern, which is now the hero of the evening. You collapse onto a sofa, dizzy, disheveled, and delighted, marveling that in a world obsessed with etiquette and restraint, all it really takes is a balloon and a little chemistry to bring out the gleeful lunatic in everyone. And perhaps, for just this once, you're grateful no one thought to invite the newspaper reporters. It turns out nitrous oxide is the original truth serum. Long-held secrets come tumbling out, some scandalous, some just embarrassingly mundane. You find out who's been cheating at whist, who hates the host's wallpaper, and who's secretly terrified of ducks. What begins as innocent laughter quickly transforms into a confessional, one more honest and unfiltered than the local priest has ever heard. For all its medical uses and scientific promise, nothing prepares a respectable crowd for the social side effects of a brain awash in laughing gas. Suddenly, the stoic Colonel Witherspoon, known for his stiff upper lip and stiffer gin, is regaling a circle of rapt listeners with the harrowing tale of the time he got lost in his own garden maze and had to be rescued by the gardener's dog. Miss Gwendolen, usually a model of discretion, admits, between peals of laughter, that she's been reusing the same fan for 3 seasons and simply pastes on new feathers every spring. As the gas makes its rounds, inhibitions fade like the evening light. Secrets that have simmered through years of formal dinners and polite conversation begin bubbling to the surface. Sir Percival, cheeks flushed and monocle long forgotten, blurts out that he thinks the family silver is hideous and that he's only been pretending to appreciate opera to avoid being disinherited. His wife, Lady Percival, who has spent years perfecting the art of the gracious hostess, admits she once replaced the entire tea service with tin because she couldn't stand polishing it. The crowd is both shocked and delighted. With every confession, the room seems to lighten. The social hierarchies briefly dissolved by shared embarrassment. The confessions take on a rhythm of their own. Each new admission draws laughter, gasps, or the knowing nod of someone who's harbored a similar secret. A chorus of "Me Too" echoes after the Earl admits he sometimes sneaks into the pantry at night to eat leftover pudding with his hands. A minor baronet's daughter shyly confesses that she's been pretending to understand chess for years and once mistook a rook for a salt cellar. It's the sort of atmosphere that makes even the most stoic judge want to air a grievance or two. The real joy, however, comes from the wonderfully absurd. One guest, Mr. Paddington, tearfully admits he cannot abide the sight of geese, which he considers untrustworthy, beady-eyed villains. Lady Beauchamp, emboldened by giggles and an extra-large dose, lets slip that she has always suspected the garden gnome is watching her through the dining-room window. A heated debate ensues about the moral character of garden ornaments, which devolves into an impromptu vote. The gnome loses, narrowly, to the rubber plant. There are, of course, some confessions that teeter on the edge of scandal. Whispers fly as it's revealed that the vicar has been watering down the communion wine for the good of the parish, and that the housekeeper sometimes adds a dash of brandy to the soup for courage. People who have spent a lifetime maintaining their composure are suddenly baring their souls, their hopes, their pet peeves, and their most embarrassing childhood stories. The party takes on the air of a confessional booth, mixed with a very silly séance. You sit quietly in a corner, trying to blend in with the wallpaper. Unless, of course, someone confesses that they hate that too. The sense of camaraderie is infectious. For all its absurdity, there's something strangely touching about the sight of a roomful of aristocrats, their wigs askew and corsets loosened, trusting each other with their most laughable vulnerabilities. The gas, it turns out, isn't just for laughter. It's for truth, for empathy, for remembering that beneath the powdered noses and stern exteriors, everyone is a little bit ridiculous. By the end of the evening, you've heard secrets you can never unhear. You've discovered the secret pudding stash, the ongoing whist conspiracy, and at least 3 irrational animal phobias. But as the laughter subsides and dignity is quietly reclaimed, you realize something lovely. Everyone, just for a moment, was able to let go of their masks and be gloriously, hilariously human. Between giggle fits, Sir Davy attempts a scientific lecture on the medical uses of nitrous oxide. No one is listening. Someone is trying to high-five a houseplant. The scene is pure Regency chaos. A circle of guests, most still recovering from the aftershocks of communal hysteria, drape themselves over every available settee, ottoman, and relative. In the midst of this happy wreckage, Sir Humphrey Davy, resolute, slightly cross-eyed from his own earlier research, and still clutching his silver goblet, raises a hand to gather attention. It is, in theory, time for science. Ladies and gentlemen, he begins. The physiological effects of nitrous oxide are most extraordinary and potentially beneficial. He tries for gravitas, but his timing is unfortunate. At that very moment, a young lord is doubled over in laughter at the sight of his own shoes, and Lady Fenwick, emboldened by her third balloon, attempts to high-five a particularly dignified aspidistra. Davy presses on, unfazed by the chaos that seems to follow wherever he brings his canister. He launches into an enthusiastic monologue about the improvement of mankind through pneumatic chemistry. There are charts, there are earnest references to the alleviation of tooth pain and the relief of melancholia. He assures the crowd that nitrous oxide has potential medical utility, a phrase that would sound far more convincing if he wasn't competing with the sound of two debutantes arguing over whether the gas would work on their family dog. One guest, entirely misinterpreting Davy's meaning, takes pneumatic chemistry as an invitation to attempt handstands. The crowd roars approval. Davy's scientific language, so at home in the Royal Institution, floats above the drawing room like a particularly well-dressed cloud. Note the subject's pulse, how it quickens, the dilation of the pupils, the elevation of mood, he enthuses, gesturing at the crowd as if they are a living experiment, which, in a sense, they are. Unfortunately, his attempt at a live demonstration is interrupted by Sir Thomas accidentally sitting on a whoopee cushion. Someone slipped under his chair, further derailing any hope of academic focus. A few genuinely curious souls attempt to pay attention, scribbling notes in the margins of their dance cards, but for the most part, the audience is more invested in discovering if hiccups sound different on gas. Davy, refusing to be discouraged, unveils a small notebook filled with observations on the safe dosage and observable side effects. He waves it around, a hopeful glint in his eye. But no one is taking notes, unless you count the poet sketching a caricature of a dancing balloon. Still, you have to admire Davy's tenacity. He's determined to prove that nitrous oxide isn't just a fashionable distraction, but a harbinger of modern medicine. He tries to describe how, in the right hands, it could revolutionize surgery. He even gestures hopefully toward a dentist in attendance, who, in turn, is desperately attempting to slip out unnoticed, unwilling to become the next test subject. Davy assures everyone that the intense exhilaration is all part of the therapeutic effect. The room is unconvinced, but everyone is at least entertained. To his credit, Davy does manage to get a few sentences out about volatile compounds, anesthesia, and the possible abolition of suffering. Unfortunately, his scholarly tone is somewhat undermined by the fact that Lady Caraway is, at that moment, wearing a balloon as a hat and leading a parade of geese across the carpet. Where did the geese come from? Best not to ask. By the end, Sir Humphrey's lecture is less a talk and more a running commentary on the world's oddest medical trial. He seems half in on the joke, offering a final toast to science, to society, and to whatever we remember tomorrow morning. The crowd erupts in applause, not entirely sure what's just happened, but confident it was, if nothing else, groundbreaking in ways their grandchildren's physicians will have to explain. And as you watch Sir Davy, equal parts genius, showman, and accidental party planner, you realize the truth. Every scientific breakthrough needs a little chaos, a lot of laughter, and a willingness to let even the most serious business be a little bit silly. Eventually, someone remembers food. Plates of aspic and jellied eels appear. The combination of nitrous-induced munchies and Victorian cuisine leads to regrettable decisions and some very confused digestive systems. It's the inevitable turning point in any gathering. The realization that, after an hour of laughter, fainting, and confessions about wallpaper and ducks. A roomful of well-heeled Londoners need a snack. You watch as the footmen glide in, balancing silver trays loaded with all the culinary marvels and abominations that 1800s high society can muster. In the gaslight, the offerings glisten, sometimes appealingly, sometimes suspiciously, and sometimes with the kind of wobbly defiance that only aspic can achieve. Aspic is everywhere, gelatinous, quivering towers of mystery meat, set in savory jelly, garnished with parsley and the faint hope that no one will ask what's inside. Someone pokes a fork at a wobbly dome, half expecting it to bite back. There are slices of cold tongue arranged artistically beside, eggs that have been marinated in something purple and alarming. Jellied eels, still as popular as ever for reasons lost to time, lurk on platters like slippery, edible question marks. For those hoping for something sweet, the options are challenging. The Regency era has never met a pudding it didn't want to boil, batter, or encase in more jelly. There's blancmange, a dessert that looks like it escaped from a hospital ward, next to candied chestnuts and cakes decorated with icing so hard you could use it to repair a shoe. At least one enterprising guest tries to cut into a fruitcake and nearly loses a button in the process. Normally, polite society would nibble at these offerings with dignified restraint. But tonight, with inhibitions loosened and appetites sharpened by all the hilarity, the approach is less refined. The Duke of Ashby, not usually known for his sense of adventure, tries to spear a pickled walnut and accidentally launches it onto Lady Harrington's gown. In the corner, a group of giggling debutantes attempt to guess the contents of a particularly pungent meat pie. Guesses include rabbit, pheasant, and, worryingly, surprise. All around, the etiquette of the dining room dissolves as completely as the aspic. People abandon forks and delicately use their fingers, justifying it with a half-hearted, "It's medicinal, really," as if a slice of eel will help them recover from laughing too hard. The host, beaming with misplaced pride, encourages everyone to try the chef's special terrine, a phrase that sends shivers down the spine of anyone who survived last season's salmon mousse incident. Nitrous oxide does strange things to your appetite. The flavors are brighter, the textures weirder, and suddenly, combinations you'd never consider seem worth a try. Pickled onions and blancmange? Why not? Aspic layered with candied orange peel? Go for it. By the time you realize your taste buds have abandoned all reason, you've joined a group making sandwich towers out of anything within reach. The punch bowl, already violated by a stray monocle, now contains half a slice of cake and someone's lemon twist. Predictably, the results are disastrous. Within minutes, an uneasy hush falls, as more than one guest feels the first pangs of digestive rebellion. You hear quiet mutters about taking the air and checking on the horses, both time-honored code for, "I must escape before this room witnesses my downfall." The butler, ever discreet, glides through with offers of peppermint cordial and knowing glances. Someone suggests a round of charades to distract from the symphony of gurgling stomachs. Someone else simply lies down on the fainting couch and hopes for the best. It's a masterclass in what not to serve, when the primary entertainment is rapid, involuntary breathing. Still, in the glow of candlelight and shared embarrassment, the disaster is somehow charming. You realize the real purpose of Regency cuisine isn't to delight but unite. After all, nothing says togetherness like a group of people in ridiculous clothes, high on science and laughter, praying for mercy from the aspic. You nibble one last questionable tartlet, swear a silent oath never to trust food that wobbles, and watch as the evening rolls on, stomachs and spirits equally unsettled. Welcome to snack time, where history's greatest dangers are not in the laboratory, but lurking right there on the silver tray. By midnight, the party has devolved into a gossipy free-for-all. Guests whisper about who passed out, who giggled until they sobbed, and whether Lady M was really faking her religious vision. You may have thought the most dangerous thing about a nitrous oxide party was the gas canister, but in truth, nothing spreads faster than a juicy rumor in a room full of tipsy aristocrats, especially after everyone's inhibitions have been dissolved by a little chemistry and a lot of communal embarrassment. It's as if the laughing gas has cracked open not just social barriers, but the floodgates of mischief and speculation. Every snort, tumble, and scandalous confession is instantly weaponized for the rumor mill, and tonight it's running at full tilt. Clusters of guests gather behind potted plants and in alcoves, their voices pitched low but eyes gleaming with excitement. The subject matter ranges from the sublime. Did you see how Lord Bracknell recited Byron while standing on a chair? To the ridiculous. I swear, the Countess mistook a houseplant for her husband. Again, someone claims to have overheard Sir Humphrey Davy proposing a toast to the aspidistra, which, considering the state of the aspidistra, may have been the most heartfelt declaration of the night. Of course, no detail is too small for scrutiny. Was Lady Frances's fainting spell genuine, or just a ploy to get out of eating more aspic? Did Lord Wexley's uncontrollable laughter actually mask a secret fear of geese, as was confessed, rather too loudly, earlier in the evening? Every slip, every wardrobe malfunction, and every accidental confession is dissected with forensic precision, then embellished as it passes from ear to ear. Some guests, realizing that their most absurd moments are now common knowledge, attempt damage control. You watch as a young debutante tries to convince her friends that she meant to somersault across the rug, and that losing a shoe was all part of an elaborate charade. A minor baronet, still flushed from laughter, assures anyone who will listen that his dramatic collapse into the potted fern was scientific research, not clumsiness. Meanwhile, Lady M, she of the religious vision, quietly suggests to anyone within earshot that it was actually a profound spiritual experience and not, as some have insinuated, the result of inhaling 3 consecutive balloons. But the party's real currency is not just embarrassment, but possibility. Every whisper carries with it the hint of a future scandal or the seeds of a new social alliance. Will the host's reputation be elevated for having thrown the most talked-about party of the year? Or will tales of balloon-related mishaps follow him for seasons to come? The musicians, finally released from their duties, are quick to add their own colourful observations. Never let it be said that the help doesn't have the best stories. Meanwhile, the staff lingers at the edges, catching fragments of gossip as they collect plates and sweep up the detritus of a night gone gloriously sideways. Even they get in on the act. By morning, the kitchen maids will have exaggerated the number of faintings from 3 to 10, and the story of the punch bowl monocle will become legend. You find yourself swept into this tide of rumor and revelation, offering up your own carefully edited account to the growing chorus. In this room, truth is flexible, memory is unreliable, and the best stories are always those that get just a little better with each telling. Someone speculates that the Prince Regent himself might attend the next party. Another guest insists that the gas was responsible for at least 2 marriage proposals and the unexpected formation of a poetry club. As the candles burn low and the last guests prepare to leave, there's a sense that the night's real entertainment has only just begun. Every laugh, every secret, every social slip will ripple through drawing rooms, dinner parties, and clubhouses for weeks to come. The nitrous oxide may wear off, but the stories and the delicious anxiety about what will be said next will last far, far longer. You slip out into the cool London night, certain of only one thing. In high society, your dignity may recover, but your reputation is about to become very, very interesting. Of course, it wouldn't be a proper historical event without an emergency. Someone inhales too much, faints dramatically, and inspires half the room to panic, and the other half to demand another balloon. It happens in slow motion, the way all the best disasters do. The evening's laughter has reached a fever pitch. Guests are sprawled across divans and on the floor, and the punch bowl now contains 3 monocles, a wilted rose, and something that might once have been a tartlet. In this heady, unguarded atmosphere, there's always someone eager to push the envelope. Tonight, it's Lord Rigsby, a man with the constitution of an ox and the common sense of a moth at a lantern festival. He insists on one more go, a phrase history will never associate with wise decision-making. With a dramatic flourish, he inhales twice the recommended amount from a freshly filled balloon, staggers a few steps, and, for one glorious moment, appears about to deliver a Shakespearean soliloquy. Instead, he slumps gracefully into a swoon, landing in the arms of Lady Frances, who promptly drops him onto a potted palm in order to preserve her gown. There's a gasp, then a flurry of activity. The room splits neatly between those rushing to help and those whose main concern is that there might not be enough gas left for another round. Sir Humphrey Davy, ever the man of science, leaps into action, if you can call it that, considering his own head is spinning from earlier demonstrations. "He's only fainted," he announces, trying for reassurance but managing only to sound mildly hopeful. The housemaids spring forward with vinaigrettes and smelling salts, waving them under Lord Rigsby's nose as if warding off evil spirits. Lady Fenwick, ever practical, suggests rolling him onto his side, while Sir Thomas, armed with the wisdom of a man who's read half of a medical pamphlet, recommends vigorous fanning and, for good measure, another puff of gas. This suggestion is swiftly vetoed by the few guests in attendance who still recall the laws of physics, or at least the basic principle that what knocked him down probably shouldn't be the cure. The debate is brisk and full of well-intentioned idiocy. Give him water. Give him brandy. Someone, fetch the doctor. The resident physician, who up until this moment was hiding in the library with the sherry, is finally located and dragged to the scene. He pronounces Lord Rigsby likely to survive and prescribes rest, fresh air, and a strict avoidance of all scientific amusements for at least a fortnight, a prescription that inspires instant jealousy from the more exhausted guests. As Lord Rigsby comes to, he's met with a hero's welcome and a round of applause that he will later interpret as a sign of social immortality rather than mild relief. The episode, of course, only adds fuel to the evening's fires. Within moments, the tale has grown in the retelling. Some claim he stopped breathing, others are certain he began reciting Latin, and one rather imaginative guest swears she saw him briefly levitate. Despite the momentary chaos, the party soldiers on. After all, Regency society is nothing if not resilient, or perhaps just stubbornly addicted to novelty and drama. The crisis gives rise to new entertainments. A group stages an impromptu charades competition to keep spirits up, while another dares Sir Humphrey to demonstrate the gas's healing effects on the remaining desserts. If anything, the near miss only emboldens the crowd. If Lord Rigsby can survive an overdose and still find his way back to consciousness, and, more importantly, his glass of punch, surely the rest can risk one more round. But the night's events leave a subtle aftertaste. Laughter grows softer, chairs are shifted closer to windows, and someone is dispatched to guard the canister lest anyone else attempt heroics. Even the most spirited revelers concede that perhaps moderation has its charms. You sense, too, a new camaraderie. Nothing unites a room quite like a shared scare and a triumphant recovery. By the time dawn threatens on the horizon, the tales of the evening's medical mayhem have already taken on mythic proportions. There are lessons here about limits, about the unpredictability of science, about the dangers of letting Lord Rigsby anywhere near an experimental device. But for now, all that matters is that everyone survived to gossip another day. And in the annals of London high society, that truly is a cause for celebration. The morning after, your head is pounding, your dignity's in question, and you're desperately hoping your escapades didn't make the social columns. At least you didn't challenge the Earl of Sandwich to a duel. This time, you wake up to the gentle agony that only the combination of late-night revelry, questionable snacks, and a heavy velvet dressing gown can provide. The sunlight seems unnecessarily personal as it creeps across your face. And somewhere in the distance, a maid is humming a tune far too cheerful for your current state of soul. Your mouth tastes faintly of punch, and something you can only identify as aspic adjacent. For a moment, you're convinced you've survived an Aldix earthquake. But then you remember. It was just another evening at a London gas party. The social event, where the only thing more unstable than the chemistry set was the guest list. You try to piece together the events of the previous night, but your memories are arranged like a shuffled deck of cards, flashes of laughter, a fainting viscount, a heroic potted fern, and the distinct feeling that you may have publicly declared your lifelong distrust of ducks. You gingerly check your reflection, hair a mess, cravat missing, one eyebrow raised in a state of permanent skepticism. You find confetti in your shoe and a mysterious balloon animal on your nightstand. Whatever happened, at least you made it home with most of your dignity intact. Or, so you hope, downstairs, the house is in a state of gentle ruin. The butler moves about with the slow, deliberate care of a man who has seen too much and is pretending he hasn't. The kitchen staff whispers over tea about who passed out first, and the footmen are busy reuniting misplaced accessories with their owners, wigs, gloves, a monocle that was last seen floating in the punch. You hear that Lord Rigsby is alive, and, astonishingly, in excellent spirits, already boasting that he survived death by science and is now immortal. You make a note never to let him near your gas lamp or your cutlery. The day's mail is a minefield of thank you notes and thinly veiled apologies. Lady Pembroke writes to inquire after your health, and also, incidentally, whether you remember composing a love poem to her parrot. Sir Humphrey Davy sends a scientific pamphlet for your future reference, which includes a footnote about moderation and the dangers of enthusiasm. The local scandal sheet has yet to publish the details, but rumours fly faster than newsprint, and you suspect your odd hat trick will be discussed over tea for weeks to come. Your body, meanwhile, has become a living reminder that what goes up must come down. There's a persistent ache behind your eyes, a suspicious bruise on your shin, and a mild queasiness that speaks to the dangers of combining jellied eel, blancmange, and involuntary cardio. You reach for a remedy, brandy perhaps, or strong tea. Anything to restore a sense of normalcy and to stave off the existential dread that comes with wondering if you, too, confessed your feelings for the aspidistra. Despite the discomfort, there's an odd sense of satisfaction in your exhaustion. You survived the madness and have a handful of stories to prove it. The relay race, the confessions, the wardrobe malfunctions, the medical emergency that, somehow, turned into a bonding moment for everyone involved. Even the most proper among your circle seems softer in the morning's light, if only because everyone is too tired to judge. You vow, as always, never to do this again, or at least not until the next invitation arrives, promising an evening of scientific marvels and new opportunities for social humiliation. After all, What is high society if not a revolving door of lessons never quite learned, reputations never quite lost, and the endless pursuit of novelty, laughter, and the hope that next time you'll be the one with the best story? As you sip your tea, grateful for modern plumbing, you can't help but smile. Because in the aftermath, with your head aching and your dignity slightly battered, you know you were part of something uniquely ridiculous. A chapter in the great ongoing comedy that is surviving high society, one gas party at a time. Critics begin to weigh in, physicians, clergymen, and your extremely judgmental aunt. Is laughing gas the next big cure, or a ticket to early retirement in a pine box? You knew it was only a matter of time before the morning after brought not just hangovers, but opinion pieces. The city's drawing rooms, coffee houses, and church vestibules are suddenly abuzz with debate. The more daring members of society declare nitrous oxide a medical marvel, the latest in a long line of cures that promises to solve everything from melancholia to the embarrassment of losing at whist. These are the early adopters, the same people who once insisted that leeches were the height of sophistication, and who still keep a bottle of laudanum in every medicine cabinet, just in case the air turns melancholy. Then come the medical men, summoned from their gloomy consulting rooms to deliver sober opinions. Dr. Blenkinsop, whose beard alone commands respect, pens a treatise warning that the after effects of nitrous oxide may include fainting, palpitations, and an irresistible urge to share personal secrets. Another physician claims that, yes, the gas may dull the pain of tooth extraction, but it also seems to encourage otherwise sensible people to recite limericks while standing on furniture. To be fair, he seems torn as to whether this is a drawback or a blessing. Newspapers publish accounts of both successful treatments and party disasters, each more dramatic than the last. There is talk of experiments gone wrong, of fainters revived with brandy and footmen forced to carry limp aristocrats out into the night air. The clergy are not to be outdone. The Reverend Forsyth takes to his Sunday pulpit to warn against surrendering one's faculties to chemical intoxication, likening it to the ancient rites of Bacchus, or worse, modern French fashion. God gave us laughter, not asphyxiation, he proclaims, as several parishioners quietly recall that he once tried the gas himself at Lady Wickham's salon. Sermons become more pointed. The fear is not just for the soul, but for society itself. If the upper crust is rolling on the floor giggling, who, precisely, is steering the ship of state? Meanwhile, your aunt, whose eyebrows are set permanently at moral outrage, has plenty to say. She declares the whole business most unseemly and makes dire predictions about moral decay, loose corset strings, and the downfall of civilization as we know it. She assures everyone that she herself has never and would never indulge, and that the only proper use of a balloon is for a tasteful child's birthday. She's already threatened to write to the Times. Against this backdrop, there are the optimists, poets and painters who see the gas as a doorway to new worlds, a muse that unlocks realms of creativity. Sir Humphrey Davy himself circulates pamphlets arguing for the scientific value of his discoveries, pointing to the future of painless surgeries and improved moods. For every anecdote of disaster, there's another claiming miraculous inspiration, an epic poem dashed off in 15 minutes, a painting that positively vibrates with color, a new pudding recipe devised in the throes of laughter. This one, mercifully, never makes it to the dinner table. The debate rages on, with neither side conceding. Is this the dawn of a new era, or the harbinger of doom? At one end of the spectrum are the thrill-seekers who view the gas as harmless, fun, a little science, a little risk, the natural successor to card games and charades. At the other are the hand-wringers and pearl-clutchers, convinced that, given enough time, all of London will be rendered unconscious by reckless inhalation. You, meanwhile, sit at your breakfast table, reading all the opinions with a growing sense of amusement and just a touch of dread. It's hard to know what to believe. Last night's laughter lingers, but so does the memory of a fainting peer and a wobbly table. Is laughing gas the miracle cure, the next medical breakthrough, or just the latest way for the bored and wealthy to embarrass themselves in public? Perhaps it's all of the above. In the end, you decide some debates aren't meant to be resolved. They're meant to be enjoyed, preferably at a safe distance from the nearest gas canister and under the watchful gaze of your aunt, who will never let you forget what happened the night science and society collided in a puff of laughter. Soon, every salon in London wants a taste. Society hostesses compete for the wildest party, the biggest balloon, and the highest body count of fainting guests. What started as a single night of madcap scientific amusement has now blossomed into a full-blown social contagion. Like a particularly fashionable rash, nitrous oxide fever sweeps across Mayfair and Belgravia. Invitations begin to rain down on London's elite, each one more elaborate and desperate for attention than the last. Come experience the wonders of modern chemistry, an evening of laughter, lunacy, and light refreshments. Balloon provided. Waistcoats optional. The city, never one to shy away from a trend, embraces the gas craze with all the restraint of a duck in a bread shop. Competition is fierce. Lady Wickham, not to be outdone by Lady Fenwick's laughing supper, imports an even larger brass canister and has it inscribed with her family motto, Risus est Regina, laughter is queen. The Marquis of Haverfield hosts an oxide masquerade, where guests are encouraged to inhale before revealing their identities. Rumours swirl that the Duchess of Sutherland hired 3 separate footmen solely to chase down runaway balloons and return them to their rightful owners. The quest for novelty quickly escalates. Some salons install elaborate gas stations, where footmen in crisp livery stand at attention, ready to refill silk balloons and monitor the crowd for signs of impending collapse. A particularly ambitious hostess has her dining room wallpapered with a mural of ancient Greek philosophers, all of whom are depicted holding balloons and sporting suspiciously manic grins. There are competitions for best laugh, most artistic feint, and even an unofficial tally of how many monocles are lost before midnight. Of course, with great competition comes great risk. One hostess, not content with mere nitrous, attempts to combine her party with a séance, leading to the only known incident of a spirit medium declaring, "Your great-aunt Ethel would like to request another balloon." Another salon features a live poetry duel between 2 guests so giddy they spend most of the evening reciting limericks to a bowl of blancmange. The city's confectioners, sensing opportunity, create balloon-shaped pastries that look festive but taste faintly of regret and almond extract. With every new gathering, the stakes rise. Guests start training for the events, practicing their giggles in the privacy of their drawing rooms, reinforcing their corset seams, and swapping tips on how to recover gracefully from a faint. It becomes understood that, at any respectable party, there will be at least 2 doctors present for emergencies, 1 poet for documentation, and a steady supply of peppermint water for the survivors. The gossip columns keep a running tally of who fainted first, who laughed loudest, and whose party had the most scientific mishaps. One particularly inventive report details a night in which a viscount, 2 dowagers, and a pet spaniel all succumbed in a near-simultaneous swoon, prompting the butler to declare the event a roaring success. Word of the trend spreads beyond London. Soon, Bath and Brighton are huffing along in envy, their own salons attempting to catch up to the capital's heights of fashionable folly. As the weeks pass, it's not unusual to hear guests at a dull gathering sigh, "Well, it's no laughing gas party, is it?" The era's social currency now includes not only titles and land, but also stories of the night you watched the Prime Minister giggle until he fell behind a settee. In this new world, survival of the fittest means being able to inhale, exhale, and recover in time to join the next round. And so, London's high society becomes a whirling carousel of parties, each one striving to outshine the last with bigger balloons, bolder antics, and ever more extravagant accounts in the scandal sheets. You watch it all unfold, sometimes from the sidelines, sometimes in the middle of the fray, half hoping you'll be remembered as the guest who laughed but never lost their hat. If you're lucky, you'll make it to the end of the season with your dignity and maybe your corset still intact. Not everyone can afford a personal chemist. Enter the do-it-yourself laughing gas kit, possibly the most dangerous subscription box of the 19th century. As laughing gas sweeps through London's drawing rooms, a peculiar new breed of social climber emerges. These are the aspirants, families with just enough ambition and slightly less common sense to crave a piece of the latest trend, but lacking the funds for their own Sir Humphrey Davy or the space for a velvet-draped salon. For them, innovation takes a humbler, more hazardous turn: the at-home kit. You receive your first do-it-yourself laughing gas kit from a distant cousin who insists it's all the rage in Manchester. The box, handsomely labelled Dr. Murgatroyd's Miraculous Scientific Amusements, promises genuine hilarity for the whole family. Inside, a suspiciously lightweight brass canister, a sheaf of instructions written in looping, optimistic script, 3 silk balloons, and what can only be described as protective headgear. Really just a wool cap. The instructions are, in theory, simple. Step 1. Combine mysterious powder A with distilled spirits or the cleanest rainwater available. Step 2. Wait for a hissing sound, assuringly described as the voice of merriment. Step 3. Inflate a balloon and inhale deeply, while seated on a sturdy chair well away from all fragile furniture and easily startled livestock. There are several footnotes advising against use by children, the elderly, and anyone of nervous disposition or with an aversion to surprise. With no footman to man the canister or monitor balloon inflation, the whole process quickly devolves into chaos. Your aunt, determined to prove her scientific acumen, dons the wool cap and nearly sets the drapes alight while attempting to boil off the impurities. Your uncle, having misread the ratio of powder to water, produces a balloon that hisses, then pops spectacularly, sending the family cat into a week-long sulk. The air fills with a smell halfway between burnt toffee and chemical warfare. But nothing deters the self-styled chemists and party enthusiasts of the aspiring classes. Within weeks, every middle-class parlour from Hampstead to Clapham is hosting its own nitrous night. The kit becomes a ticket to social currency. Nothing says you're on the rise like an invitation scribbled on repurposed shop receipts. Do join us Saturday next for jellied eel, home-brewed punch, and merriment of the most scientific variety. Of course, the results are mixed, and not just because half the instructions seem to have been written after an evening of self-experimentation. With no professionals to supervise, the fun often ends in a mixture of euphoria, confusion, and the lingering aroma of singed upholstery. There are tales of homegrown disasters, a group in Brixton accidentally emptying their canister in a root cellar and laughing uncontrollably for an hour while the neighbours considered calling the vicar. Another family in Islington inadvertently involves the postman, who leaves with a balloon and a brand new sense of existential dread. Some climb the social ladder one giggle at a time. The truly ambitious send news of their successful experiments, along with slightly desperate requests for refills and advice on getting the taste of burnt rubber out of the curtains, to their wealthier friends, hoping for a reciprocal invite to a proper gas party. It becomes a running joke in less fortunate households. When the weather's too poor for an outing, why not stay in and risk mild asphyxiation from the comfort of your own drawing room? Inevitably, the medical community catches wind. Pamphlets begin to circulate, warning of the perils of unsupervised hilarity and the alarming rise of upholstery casualties among the city's aspiring classes. Chemists and apothecaries, always ready to spot a market, begin selling anti-hysterical lozenges and pamphlets, advertising balloon inflations by appointment. Yet, for all its risks, the at-home kit brings something else, a sense of belonging. For a few brief moments, laughter bridges the gap between drawing room and parlor, between silk and homespun, and maybe, just maybe, as you cough, laugh, and sweep up the wreckage, you suspect that high society's best-kept secret isn't just the nitrous. It's that the best parties, the ones that leave your furniture and your dignity slightly worse for wear, are the ones you make yourself. In a rare, quiet moment, you ponder, is this the pinnacle of scientific progress, or a sign that everyone desperately needs a hobby or a therapist? You find yourself alone for a minute, perched on the edge of a chaise, clutching the remains of a punch cup and surveying the wreckage. Fainted piers, draped artfully across settees, a houseplant wearing someone's shoe, a balloon slowly deflating in the chandelier. The air smells like burnt sugar and slightly singed ambition. It's been hours since the first balloon went up, and even longer since anyone in this room remembered why they ever cared about etiquette, composure, or the finer points of wallpaper pattern. It's in this lull, somewhere between the last round of nitrous-fueled giggles and the first pangs of hangover, that the philosophical questions creep in. The candles flicker, casting long shadows across the marbled floor. What, exactly, are you all doing here? Is this the heroic future that the Royal Society had in mind? Or has science been hijacked by people with more disposable income than common sense? If progress means laughing yourself into oblivion while wearing 10 pounds of velvet, is it time to reconsider the meaning of advancement? You glance across the room and see Sir Humphrey Davy himself, sprawled contentedly, discussing the mind's liberation with a poet whose collar is on backward, and whose verse has deteriorated into a string of joyful nonsense. The conversation lurches from high-minded talk of expanded consciousness to arguments about whether the canary in the corner is plotting something nefarious. There's an earnestness to it all, a belief that tonight, something important has happened, even if no one is exactly sure what. For the more philosophical guests, the experience of laughing gas is the perfect metaphor for the era. Exhilarating, dazzling, a little bit out of control, and guaranteed to leave you uncertain about whether you've glimpsed the future or just given yourself a case of hiccups. Is this science at its best? Bold, boundary-pushing, and willing to risk everything for knowledge? Or is it science at its most foolish, where intellectual curiosity has been replaced by the pursuit of the next party trick? You wonder, too, about the search for escape. Beneath the velvet and bravado, London's elite are as anxious as anyone, worried about their fortunes, their reputations, their legacy. Maybe the gas is just a convenient excuse to let go of the pressure, to be ridiculous for a night and blame it on chemistry instead of confession. It's easier to say, "It was the nitrous," than admit you've always wanted to shout poetry at a potted palm or confess your fear of geese to a roomful of strangers. Of course, there's a subtler question. What does it mean to chase novelty? To be the first to try something new, no matter the risks. Some might call it bravery. Others would say it's desperation. But as the laughter fades and guests begin gathering their coats and their composure, you can't help but sense a kind of hopefulness behind it all. A belief that, even if tonight's antics are ridiculous, tomorrow might bring something truly meaningful from all this mirth and experimentation. You swirl the dregs of your punch and try to remember the last time you felt so liberated. For one evening, no one cared about status, fashion, or whether their sideburns were uneven. Everyone was equal in their vulnerability, united by the utterly human need to forget their troubles and find joy, even if it meant risking a spectacular tumble or a ruined cravat. As the clock chimes and the room empties, you realize you're strangely grateful for the madness. Perhaps this, more than any scientific lecture or society ball, is the point. Not the gas, but the laughter. Not the breakthrough, but the brief shining moment of community in a world that is so often cold, divided, and ruled by decorum. Tonight, science didn't just expand your mind. It gave you permission to be gloriously, unapologetically human. And that, you suspect, is progress worth toasting. Even if you're toasting with a teacup full of punch, sitting beside a slightly judgmental aspidistra. Even the famous get in on the act. A well-known poet tries nitrous and writes 3 pages of nonsense. A politician forgets his own policies. The butler takes notes for his memoir. The arrival of notable guests is always the turning point for any respectable gathering, and gas parties are no exception. Tonight's affair, already teetering on the edge of mayhem, tips fully into legend when half the guest list is drawn from London's newspapers and the other half seems likely to make headlines for all the wrong reasons. The energy shifts palpably as word spreads. Lord Byron is here. Or was that Charles Lamb? Or just someone with equally questionable hair? Suddenly, everyone wants to be close enough to eavesdrop, or at least claim they witnessed a great mind unraveling mid-laugh. Poets, by nature, are allergic to being left out of anything that smacks of mystery or misery, and the allure of mind-expanding gas is irresistible. The aforementioned poet, rumoured to be a romantic but behaving more like a Saturday night at the tavern, steps up to the canister, inhales with the gravitas of a man seeking inspiration, and promptly collapses into an armchair, overcome by the fit of giggles usually reserved for school children and people who have just discovered their breeches are on backward. Within minutes, he's scrawling wild metaphors and rhymes on the back of a menu card, most of which seem to involve clouds, pigeons, and the eternal mystery of why is there jelly on everything in this house. His work is rescued from the fireplace by an enterprising debutante, who will later sell it for an astonishing sum to a collector of eccentric memorabilia. Not to be outdone, the evening's politicians have their own moment of glory, or infamy, depending on your perspective. Sir Marmaduke Plimsoll, Member of Parliament and notorious windbag, assures the crowd he will retain absolute clarity of mind, regardless of chemistry. He then takes a balloon, makes an impromptu speech in which he confuses the corn laws with the house rules for charades, and is only rescued by his wife, who hastily steers him away from the dessert table before he can attempt fiscal reform using blancmange. The crowd is delighted. Never before has government seemed so approachable or so likely to trip over its own spats. Of course, no party would be complete without the silent observers, scribbling furiously in the shadows. Tonight, it's the butler, long-suffering, eagle-eyed, and quietly compiling notes for what promises to be the juiciest memoir of the century. He logs every confession, every fashion disaster, every moment when society's finest became just a little less fine. Years from now, when My Life Below Stairs, the truth about laughing gas and London's upper echelons hits the shelves, you can say you were there for the first chapter. The mingling of classes is one of the most surprising outcomes of these events. At the height of hilarity, a celebrated painter ends up arm in arm with a renowned barrister, both attempting to recite Latin backwards, failing spectacularly. The poet is embraced as an oracle, then as a court jester, then as a cautionary tale when he attempts to rhyme orange for the 5th time, and is gently escorted to the punch bowl for a cooling beverage. The entire affair is both absurd and democratic. Once the gas flows, all titles are leveled, and everyone is united by the universal struggle to remain upright and vaguely respectable. By midnight, the gossip has already begun to spread. Who said what? Who fainted? Who proposed an amendment to the Marriage Act in the form of an ode to a houseplant? The famous and infamous are now fodder for morning-after anecdotes. Their participation bestows instant cachet to the host and everlasting ammunition for every guest hoping to one-up their neighbours at the next assembly. As the carriages roll away and the last poems are stuffed hastily into coat pockets, you realise this is history in the making, or at the very least, legend in the exaggerating. You're left with the delicious satisfaction of knowing that, for one night, the people you read about in the papers became every bit as ridiculous as the rest of us. And, as always, the butler saw it all. Laughing gas is the Great Equalizer, until it isn't. Suddenly, rank means nothing, and the Dowager Countess is singing sea shanties with the stable boy. For the first dazzling hours, the entire drawing room feels transformed. The rules that usually bind every gesture, every word, every careful tilt of a teacup simply evaporate with each round of giggling and swooning. You might find yourself sandwiched between a viscount and a valet, all three of you red-faced and roaring with laughter at a joke that wouldn't survive daylight. The Duchess, so often seen glaring down her aquiline nose at lesser mortals, is now rolling on the carpet with her hair undone and her pearls tangled around her ankles. If you didn't know better, you'd think the entire social order of Britain had collapsed somewhere between the canapes and the second round of inhalation. The gas party, in its heyday, is a brief, glorious experiment in classless society. Servants, usually trained to be invisible, catch themselves smiling at the spectacle, and more than one footman ends up conscripted into a 3-legged race with the local magistrate. Sir Humphrey Davy's lectures, intended for the scientific elite, are received just as raptly by a scullery maid perched at the doorway, craning to hear about the elevation of mood. The stable boy, who until this evening's mischief rarely set foot on carpet that wasn't immediately swept after, now finds himself leading a conga line that includes a bishop, a banker, and 2 giggling poets. Of course, even the best-intentioned anarchy can't quite escape gravity. As the night rolls on, a gentle, invisible hand seems to reassert the old divisions. The Dowager Countess, now a little less lucid, but still clinging to her sense of self, takes up residence on the grandest settee and directs a slightly off-key chorus of sea shanties, while the stable boy, having had his brief brush with aristocratic glory, is gently guided back to the servants' door by a butler, whose smile is just a shade too professional. The great experiment wobbles, then tilts back toward the familiar. Some guests, sensing the return of order, scramble to reclaim their dignity. The baronet, who just finished a handstand contest with the housekeeper, suddenly remembers he is wearing a family ring that's older than the Hanoverian dynasty and affects a limp, hoping to blame his bruised pride on a polo injury. Lady Bexley, moments after proposing to the undergardener, quickly blames the gas for her lapse and resumes her usual posture, spine like a ramrod. Conversation limited to weather and local charity events. And yet, Even as the social boundaries slide back into place, something has shifted. The memory of shared laughter lingers, refusing to be tidied away with the empty glasses and spent balloons. There are quick, embarrassed glances across the room, a new inside joke among people who, an hour ago, would never have acknowledged one another in the street. The footman who helped the bishop to his feet after an overzealous swoon receives a rare smile of thanks the next morning. A poet is seen slipping a note to the scullery maid, the content of which will keep the household gossiping until the next equinox. If you listen closely, you can still catch snatches of that unruly joy. The Dowager Countess, humming the refrain of her favourite shanty under her breath. The stable boy, grinning as he sweeps the entryway, now a minor legend among his peers. For a moment, just a moment, the gas party did what centuries of sermons, speeches, and reform bills could not. It levelled the playing field, even if only until the punch bowl ran dry. The next morning, the hierarchies resume their march. Titles regain their weight, doors their invisible boundaries. But for those who were there, the memory of the night when everyone was simply ridiculous together glows warmly. An intoxicating reminder that sometimes all it takes to upend the world is a balloon, a little scientific curiosity, and permission to be utterly, gloriously silly. And maybe, for a few precious hours, that's all the revolution you need. News spreads, and predictably, moral outrage follows. The newspapers clutch their pearls, clergy warn of sinful giggling, and Parliament briefly considers regulating party favours. It always starts the same way. A whiff of scandal, a rumour making the rounds at breakfast, and within days, half of London is convinced civilization is on the verge of collapse. This time, the catalyst is not a duel, a disastrous debut, or an untimely elopement, but nitrous oxide. And not just any nitrous, but the kind inhaled at high society's most fashionable addresses, with fainting counts and giggle tallies broadcast by footmen and kitchen maids alike. First, the newspapers seize on the story like hounds on a meat pie. The Morning Chronicle prints a breathless exposé. Laughter, lunacy, and lurid revelry. The dangers of the devil's gas in our drawing rooms. The editor, never one to miss a moral panic, commissions a lurid illustration. A duchess collapsed over a chaise, while monocles and balloons scatter like debris after a battle. Editorials follow. TSK-Sking, the decline of British restraint. And warning that if left unchecked, this epidemic of chemical frivolity will unmoor the very foundations of empire. Clergy across the city catch the fever. Pulpit thunder mixes with Victorian concern. Giggling, warns Reverend Forsyth, is but the first slippery step on the road to debauchery and the ruination of souls. Congregations, for the most part, pretend to be scandalized while privately wondering if the vicar's own niece wasn't seen giggling herself senseless at last Tuesday's soiree. Hymns are rewritten to include lines about modest joy and sober merriment. Bible study groups host heated debates on whether St. Paul would have approved of inhaling science for pleasure. Opinions are divided. It isn't long before the politicians sense an opportunity, never one to let a crisis go to waste, especially if it means distracting from an actual policy debate. Members of Parliament take the floor with solemn faces and quivering voices. Are we to allow our youth, nay, our entire upper class, to endanger themselves for the sake of a fleeting, chemical-induced euphoria? Petitions are drawn up to ban recreational inhalation. One committee proposes a balloon registry. Another suggests licensing household canisters, with annual inspections by the Royal Society and, preferably, a few nosy neighbours. Satirists and cartoonists have a field day. Broadsheets appear, featuring caricatures of powdered dowagers floating above the Thames, propelled by rogue balloons. "Gas it out!" screams one headline. There's even a play staged at Covent Garden, The Fainting Countess, or Too Much Air for the Aristocracy, complete with onstage swooning and a chorus line of giggling footmen. Society, of course, splits neatly down the middle. Half of London is titillated, desperate for an invitation to the next forbidden gas party. The other half denounces the trend with increasingly creative outrage. Letters pour into the Times, demanding stricter supervision of scientific amusements. Some call for returning to good, clean entertainments, like fox hunting, dueling, and reciting the complete works of Milton by candlelight. A few truly radical reformers propose educational pamphlets. The Dangers of Unchaperoned Laughter, a guide for concerned parents. In the drawing rooms and parlours where it all began, the response is mixed. Some hostesses quietly retire their gas canisters, moving on to séances or spiritualist teas. Others double down, boasting that their next party will feature even more laughter, clergy, and journalists not invited. For every faint-hearted hostess who capitulates to the outrage, there are 3 more who stock up on silk balloons and practice fainting into ferns with renewed vigor. You, ever the observer, sip your tea and watch the storm from the safety of your own home. You know better than to underestimate the power of moral panic, or the ability of high society to reinvent itself around the next scandal. The gas craze may fade, but the outrage will echo for weeks, months, maybe even until the next season's scandal pushes it out of the papers. Because in London, as in every age, laughter is a fleeting rebellion, but outrage is forever. Word gets out beyond Mayfair. Suddenly, everyone wants in. Street performers, bored doctors, and ambitious pickpockets all try to score a taste of high society's latest obsession. In a city as layered and restless as 19th century London, it doesn't take long for any secret, especially one this noisy, to slip past the velvet curtains and out into the fog. The servants whisper first, swapping tales in the kitchens and laundry rooms, passing on what they've seen. The laughter, the fainting, the truly heroic number of accessories left behind in the aftermath. By the time a footman's second cousin hears about the miracle balloons, the word is out, and the gas craze begins its inevitable migration down the social ladder. First come the medical students, eager to advance their research, which, in practice, means wheedling invitations and offering unsolicited advice about safe dosages at garden gates. Next, street magicians and performers seize on the spectacle. If the rich can turn nitrous oxide into a game, why not add a little showmanship? Before you know it, Covent Garden is alive with acrobats performing while inhaling from battered balloons, passing hats for pennies and applause. A clever pickpocket might pinch a silver snuff box in the confusion, though more than one gets caught giggling and loses the night's take. The shops catch on quickly too. Apothecaries start hawking miracle vapor kits, each promising aristocratic delight and temporary euphoria. Just like the fancy folk, for a shilling or two, you can purchase a miniature gas canister. Some instructions, written in very small print, and the vague promise that you, too, can chortle like a viscount and swoon like a countess. It's less science, more sales pitch. But who's counting when everyone's already dizzy? Public houses and music halls are next. By week's end, a clever landlord has set up Laughing Hour, complete with gas balloons for those who tire of gin or want something to cut through the fog of London's long grey nights. The laughter, as it turns out, is infectious. The lower classes have their own party, one not dependent on the approval of the gossip columns or the timetables of society hostesses. Here, the gas craze takes on a different flavour. a shared joke, a rare moment of silliness that belongs to everyone, not just those with titles and tailcoats. Inevitably, the authorities take notice. A magistrate is spotted lurking at the back of a particularly raucous street performance, scrawling notes and trying not to look amused. Local priests, alarmed at the prospect of mass giggling, warn against the dangers of unearned joy, which only makes the whole business more appealing. Children race each other through alleys, competing to see who can blow up the biggest balloon, while market sellers try to outdo one another with tales of the day I saw Lady Wickham's wig roll across the pavement. The blending of classes has its moments of comedy and chaos. A well-heeled partygoer, slumming it for adventure, finds herself arm in arm with a fishmonger as they both attempt to sing a song neither fully remembers. The line between performer and audience blurs, and for a few golden nights, London feels almost equal, a city united by laughter, if not by law. Of course, the risks remain. Without Sir Humphrey Davy, or a footman to keep watch, fainting spells and confusion are more common. Someone inevitably tries to inflate a balloon with something stronger than nitrous and spends the night talking to a lamppost. The city's pickpockets soon discover that a room full of people doubled over with laughter is harder to rob than they'd hoped. Besides, it's difficult to flee with the giggles. Still, for all the confusion, the gas craze's journey into the streets proves that laughter and the hunger for a bit of absurdity isn't the preserve of the privileged. As the fad trickles down, you see moments of joy spring up in the unlikeliest places. A coal seller giggling at dawn, a street urchin practicing curtsies, a group of factory girls sharing a single balloon on their lunch break, bursting with happiness in the shadow of the city's smokestacks. You watch, bemused and a little moved, as a party trick meant for the drawing rooms of Mayfair becomes a gift for the whole city. For a brief, extraordinary moment, everyone is in on the joke. Inevitably, the thrill wears off. Someone invents a new fad, or maybe too many people sprain their ankles in balloon-related accidents. The gas parties fade, but their legend lingers. It was bound to happen. London's social calendar, after all, is built on novelty. One week, it's all about scientific laughter and airborne monocles. The next, it's table-tipping seances or dancing the quadrille on roller skates. The first sign of the end comes quietly. An invitation ignored here, a canister left half full there, a once enthusiastic hostess realizing that her prized Persian carpet can't take another spill of punch, or a repeat of Lady M's fainting fits. The gas itself starts to lose its shine. At first, each new party promises the kind of unbridled joy only seen when the rules are temporarily suspended. But by the 10th invitation, the novelty has worn thin. Even the most dedicated thrill-seekers begin to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there are better uses for a Saturday night than wrangling balloons and apologizing to the footman for another accidental incident with the punch bowl. There's only so many times you can tell the story of Lord Rigsby's famous swoon before people start pretending they have a prior engagement with their embroidery hoops or their accountants. The doctors, who, at the height of the craze, alternated between issuing dire warnings and quietly attending parties themselves, start to see an uptick in sprained wrists, bruised egos, and more than one unexplained episode of spontaneous poetry. The apothecaries run out of peppermint cordial. The local upholsterer grows rich from repairing furniture casualties. But after a while, even the scandal sheets lose interest. Another gas party just doesn't sell papers like it used to, especially when Parliament is busy debating the merits of galvanic bathtubs or the shocking new trend of reading French novels aloud. In every corner of society, there's a collective, unspoken sense of fatigue. You notice that the stories have begun to repeat themselves. Did you hear about the Viscount who tried to waltz with a hat stand? Yes, but that was last week. Now he's into mesmerism. The jokes grow a little tired. The laughter a little forced. Even Sir Humphrey Davy, who once delighted in leading the charge, is seen slipping quietly out of a party before the first balloon is even inflated, already halfway to his next scientific obsession. Some guests, of course, never quite recover. There's always that one dowager who insists on dragging out the canister at the end of the evening, hoping to relive the glory days of communal cackling. There's always a poet who claims to have been changed forever by the experience, though the only discernible difference is that his rhymes are even stranger than before. But for the majority, the era of the laughing gas party becomes just another chapter in the long, ongoing novel of things briefly adored and then set aside. Yet the legend of those nights lingers, casting a rosy glow over memory. Years later, you'll overhear two gentlemen at the club, recalling that wild winter of 3 when no one in Mayfair was sober after 8 o'clock. You'll pass a group of matrons trading stories about the time Lady Wickham's wig ended up in the chandelier, and every face will light up with nostalgia for a moment of collective silliness that, for a while, brought London together. The world keeps spinning, trends come and go, but something of the gas parties remains. The knowledge that, for a fleeting, helium-bright season, everyone let their guard down. The grandest, most rigid society in the world stopped worrying about status, reputation, or even basic safety, and simply laughed. It's a memory that outlasts any hangover. A whispered secret tucked inside the city's heart. A legend to be dusted off whenever the world grows too heavy, and someone needs a reason to remember how good it feels to be ridiculous. So the parties fizzle out. But the laughter? That, for better or worse, keeps echoing. Soft, scandalous, and just a little bit mad, through the halls of history. Lying in your modern bed, you can't help but ask, would you have made it through a night of Victorian nonsense? Or would you have been the one calmly sipping tea in the corner, waiting for everyone to regain consciousness? It's a question that haunts all late-night time travelers and accidental historians. In an age when the greatest risks at a party are double-dipping the hummus or someone forgetting your pronouns, how would you fare among the corsets, chaos, and complete disregard for workplace safety regulations that defined the deadly nitrous oxide parties of 1800s London? Would you throw yourself into the fray, balloon in hand and monocle firmly affixed, or would you quietly edge toward the nearest exit, clutching your dignity like a well-worn security blanket? You imagine waking up in a house blazing with gaslight, your nose full of lavender and coal smoke, with a butler at the door and a footman eyeing you as if you're about to try something regrettable with the silverware. You're wearing at least 4 layers of clothing, none of which stretch, and your stomach is still recovering from a dinner of jellied eels and mystery aspic. There's an invitation on your dresser. Scientific amusements, this Friday. Refreshments and risks provided. Would you RSVP, yes, or start plotting a sudden escape to the country? Picture yourself walking into the drawing room, the air already thick with anticipation and hair pomade. The host, some mix of mad scientist and enthusiastic chaos agent, invites you to take the first puff. The whole room is watching. Can you resist? Do you follow the crowd, or do you immediately start asking awkward, sensible questions like, has this been cleared by the Royal College of Physicians, or is there a waiver? If you're the sort who checks the fire exits in cinemas, Victorian high society may have eaten you alive, possibly literally, depending on what was in the aspic that night. Now consider the moment the giggles set in and all social boundaries collapse. Could you laugh along as a dowager countess recites limericks to a potted palm? Or would you be too distracted by the number of monocles ricocheting around the room? Would you embrace the madness and join the gas balloon relay, risking your ankle and your reputation? Or would you find yourself grimacing in sympathy for the butler, silently wishing for the sweet relief of Netflix and a weighted blanket? On the other hand, maybe there's a secret part of you that would thrive in the pandemonium, perhaps freed from your smartphone, blue light, and the relentless hum of modern anxieties. You'd discover a talent for fainting stylishly or composing impromptu poetry after a hearty inhale of nitrous. Maybe you'd be the star of the party, the one everyone remembers, not for your sense, but for your sensational high-pitched laugh or your dazzling ability to navigate a room full of half-conscious aristocrats while keeping your cravat pristine. And then there's the aftermath, the nitrous hangover, the gossip, the lingering dread that your confession about being terrified of ducks will make it into the society columns. Could you weather the storm with a stiff upper lip and a handwritten apology note? Or would you simply vanish from society, seeking refuge among the teetotalers and the non-inhalers? In the end, whether you would have survived a deadly nitrous oxide party says less about your risk tolerance and more about the eternal, irresistible pull of collective absurdity. The Victorians, buttoned up, anxious, and aching for distraction, found it in a balloon and a roomful of laughter. We, in our own way, find it in memes, reality TV, or group chats at 2 a.m. Maybe that's the real common thread, the need to escape together into something briefly, gloriously ridiculous. So as you close your eyes and listen to the hum of your fan, and not a distant chorus of giggling aristocrats, congratulate yourself. You survived another day of modern life. But deep down, you know, part of you might have survived the gas party too, even if only as the person hiding behind a potted fern, taking notes for posterity. Someone has to fill, tie, and deliver all those gas balloons, and it's not the Duke. Enter the underpaid, overexposed balloon handler, a harried footman with raw knuckles and a 1,000-yard stare. As you accept your next dose, you catch his eye and realize he's seen things, terrible things, like Lord Pembroke reciting bawdy limericks to a taxidermied fox. Forget Downton Abbey drama. The real suffering tonight is in sore fingers and the haunting, inescapable sound of 50 people giggling out of sync. It's easy, swept up in the chaos of a nitrous-fueled evening, to forget that the true backbone of every good party isn't the gas or the guests. It's the servants working behind the scenes, for the poor soul tasked with managing the balloons. Tonight is less about science or social climbing, and more about sheer, relentless manual labor. You'd think being a footman in a grand London townhouse meant carrying silver trays or opening doors with a dramatic flourish. Instead, tonight, it means spending hours hunched over a brass canister, inflating, knotting, and shuttling a seemingly endless supply of balloons to guests who never say thank you, and seem to believe that balloons, much like champagne, should simply appear when summoned. Each balloon is a minor battle. The canister hisses, the silk stretches, and the handler's fingers, raw and slightly numb, struggle to knot each one before the gas escapes, or, worse, before Lady Wickham's poodle decides it's a new chew toy. The noise is constant, a mix of squeaks, giggles, and the ever-present snap of yet another balloon escaping its handler and soaring triumphantly to the ceiling. By midnight, half the room is decorated in accidental airborne ornaments, and the handler is beginning to suspect he's invented a new form of upper body exercise, or possibly repetitive strain injury. Occasionally, the balloon handler gets a moment's rest, usually to field questions from anxious guests. Is this really safe? Can I have a pink one? Has anyone died tonight yet? He fields these with the blank, polite stare of someone who has decided not to engage with the moral or medical implications of his job. Every so often he catches a glimpse of his reflection in a gilt mirror. Face flushed, hair disheveled, one glove missing, sacrificed, no doubt, to an overzealous baroness in pursuit of her third balloon. He wonders if the scientists ever stop to consider the after effects of this particular experiment. The swelling in his hands, the numbness in his thumbs, the sound of his own laughter, hollow and tired, echoing long after the guests have passed out or moved on to new amusements. Of course, the real hazard isn't the physical labor, it's the things he's forced to witness. There's no training for the psychological impact of seeing Lady Beauchamp perform an improvised interpretive dance in a hoop skirt, or Lord Caraway attempting to recite Virgil while simultaneously inflating his own balloon, badly. Every giggle, every swoon, every wardrobe malfunction is catalogued in the balloon handler's memory, a secret record of high society's most undignified moments. These are stories he'll never share, at least not until he writes his own tell-all memoir, but which will haunt his dreams long after the last bit of silk has been swept from the ballroom floor. By the time dawn creeps over the rooftops, the balloon handler is the last man standing, still gathering stray balloons from beneath furniture, still nursing a collection of minor cuts and bruises, still humming along with the faint, ghostly laughter that lingers in the curtains. The guests will leave with wild stories and headaches. The scientists will leave with new theories and probably a minor scandal. But the balloon handler? He'll leave with sore fingers, a 1,000-yard stare, and the secret, slightly smug knowledge that he is the only one who truly survived the night. Witness to the madness, the hilarity, and the messy, marvelous human need to chase joy, one balloon at a time. Not everyone at the party is inhaling. There's always a cluster of wary aunts, stoic uncles, and two philosophers in the corner, pretending to observe for a forthcoming essay. They hover by the potted palms, sipping tepid sherry, feigning interest in the weather, and occasionally dodging balloons as if they're venomous snakes. Every party needs witnesses for plausible deniability, after all. And someone has to remind Lady Beauchamp that her petticoat is on inside out. You spot them immediately upon entering the drawing room. The stalwart abstainers, the last holdouts of dignity, and the unofficial guardians of the evening's remaining shreds of respectability. They cluster like a defensive phalanx near the exit or behind substantial pieces of furniture, eyes darting between the giggling masses and the nearest escape route. For them, this night is not about risk or scientific exploration. It's about survival. Their greatest thrill is not a lungful of nitrous oxide, but the satisfaction of avoiding it altogether. There's Aunt Millicent, fanning herself at triple speed, whispering to anyone who'll listen that her constitution is far too delicate for modern amusements. She produces peppermint lozenges from a seemingly bottomless reticule, offering them to the equally wary as if they're holy relics. Her brother, Uncle Cyril, holds a glass of sherry with both hands, knuckles white, never quite taking a sip. "You never know," he mutters, "what's been put in the punch." The philosophers, never ones to pass up an opportunity for intellectual grandstanding, stand a safe distance from the gas apparatus, making notes on human behavior. Observe the democratizing effects of nitrous oxide. One intones, peering over his spectacles. Tonight, the footman and the Viscount are equals. The other, less convinced, simply writes hysteria in velvet and doodles a caricature of Sir Humphrey Davy wearing a balloon hat. As the evening unfolds, this cluster perfects the art of looking engaged while doing absolutely nothing. They are the masters of the non-committal nod, the diplomatic cough, and the well-timed trip to the powder room. When the gas relay begins, they retire to the conservatory, feigning rapt interest in the orchids. When pressed to participate, they politely demur, citing gout, neuralgia, or, in one inspired case, a lingering sensitivity to atmospheric pressure changes. They serve a crucial function, these careful dodgers. They are the keepers of family secrets, the repositories of memory, who will later be relied upon to fill in the gaps. Just enough truth to keep the story alive, just enough fiction to keep reputations intact. When the shrieks reach fever pitch, they glance at each other knowingly, silently betting on who will faint next. If a crisis occurs, and it will, they spring into action, fetching vinaigrettes, straightening wigs, and repositioning toppled guests with the brisk efficiency of those who have witnessed every kind of disaster before. Yet even the most steadfast are not immune to the party's chaos. A stray balloon might bounce their way, causing a moment of panic and an awkward scramble behind a potted palm. A cousin who's had one too many giggles may stumble over, clutching their arm and insisting on a waltz. The prudes and skeptics are forever dodging invitations, spilled punch, and the threat of public embarrassment. Still, they hold their ground, firm in their belief that decorum will win out, or at least that plausible deniability is better than a headline in the morning papers. And then there are those quiet moments, when the party is at its wildest, and the air is thick with laughter and confessions, when the abstainers exchange a subtle glance of solidarity, a silent agreement that someone has to be able to recount the night with a straight face. Tomorrow, it will be these witnesses who remind the Dowager Countess that yes, she did sing sea shanties with the stable boy, and no, her petticoat was not properly affixed. They are the chroniclers, the caretakers, the ones who ensure that the legend of the evening lives on, told with just enough embellishment to keep everyone guessing. As dawn approaches and the last balloons float aimlessly near the ceiling, the artful dodgers dust off their lapels, finish their sherry, and prepare to re-enter society, untouched, unscathed, and utterly essential. Because in every era, at every wild party, someone must remain sensible enough to tell the tale and to make sure Aunt Millicent gets home with her dignity and her petticoat intact. So, as you drift off tonight, spare a gentle thought for those 1800s London partygoers, draped in brocade and ambition, chasing the next big thrill, only to end up face down on a fainting couch after one balloon too many. They survived their own era's version of fun, with nothing but optimism, peer pressure, and a scientifically questionable urge to outlaugh mortality. Every giggle in a velvet-draped parlour was a reminder that no matter the era, people will always risk life and limb to escape boredom, preferably with a good audience and a dash of dangerous chemistry. The nitrous oxide parties of London's high society were ridiculous, reckless, and undeniably human. They turned the mundane into mayhem, and made the world's most powerful people look, sound, and act gloriously foolish, proving that when it comes to bad decisions, history repeats itself, often while wearing a tiara. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into a clean bed, free of corsets, social pressure, and the lingering scent of spent balloons, maybe give a little nod to the mad inventors, the daring party guests, and the balloon handlers who all contributed to history's most absurd sleepover. Remember, our ancestors endured much, all for the sake of novelty, laughter, and sometimes just to feel something after a lifetime of boiled mutton. Let it all settle in. The resilience, the mischief, the delightfully poor judgment. You made it through the night without fainting in a potted plant. And your biggest worry is whether you'll dream of monocles or musical chairs. Be grateful for your own peaceful comforts. History may be full of perilous parties, but it's also full of people, stubborn, hopeful, and spectacularly ridiculous. Sleep easy, knowing you survived the night with your dignity and your oxygen intact. Good night.